Hi, everyone. Welcome along to this Services Delivery Alliance Member Spotlight with the wonderful Kate Green from Attentive. How are you?
Hi, I'm well. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. In New York City today, I think.
In New York City,
Very good.
traipsing around the city as I love to do, meeting with some of our sales leaders here in the office.
All right, wonderful. Whereabouts in New York is your office based?
We're in Nomad.
Nomad. Okay, cool. Very nice. Very nice. Well, I'm a big fan of New York. Been there many years, as you have seen from my restaurant recommendations that I give.
Thank you for the recommendations. We didn't take you up on them, but we went close. We were in Tribeca last night. Yeah.
All right, very good, very good. Well, Raoul's for anyone listening, watching, Raoul's New York, Steak Poivre. It's important. Give us a little bit of background to yourself, the scope of your role, and the organization that you work for, if you don't mind, to begin with.
Yeah, absolutely. Attentive is a marketing platform, marketing SaaS platform. Most of our customer base is an e-commerce retailer, big brands, big name brands, and we have evolved from the leaders in SMS marketing as our kind of sole channel to now a multi-product SMS, email, push marketing platform founded in about 2017, I want to say. I've been
Hmm.
with Attentive for almost 5 years, leading solutions architecture, platform services, implementation teams, and really partnering cross-functionally with our go-to-market strategy teams and transforming what was a very insanely expensive services team into much closer to a break-even model.
All right, very good, very good. Expensive but worth it.
Expensive but worth it, high
There we go.
value.
There we go. High value. Very good. No, I mean, you and I have talked a lot over the
Yeah.
years about, I think, kind of the evolving nature of services inside of SaaS businesses. So it's keen to get you on to learn, like today, a little bit about kind of how you've evolved the function there, but also how you're bringing AI into the ways of working, which I think is a really interesting and practical example. Just to begin with, though, so that folks kind of get a little bit of an understanding about kind of the background about, like you mentioned, you were, a cost center, right? And you're moving towards more of a perhaps a profit center or a strategic leverage type of motion. But give us a little bit of background in terms of like how has the services motion at Attentive evolved over the last years?
Yeah, over the past year and a half, I've been focused on sort of backing us into a more traditional services model where we were already delivering a lot of really, like you say, high value services to our customers, including implementation and onboarding, including platform services, so design and build work, as well as kind of a whole fleet of solutions architects that we have on hand who can help drive value through more kind of customized integrations and reporting and things like that. And so we took a look at that, and then we created a lot of packaging around what was we were already doing and knew to be true. And so over the past kind of 2 years, we've been working to not only sell those services to our new customers, but also convert our existing customers into contracted engagements on those packages. It was only in July that I took over the implementation team. And before that, I was really working closely with the sales and implementation teams to sort of capture the actual scope of work that they were doing and then put pricing and packaging around it. And then now that I've kind of been, because I was very kind of closely aligned with those teams, I was kind of had a firsthand seat to view or firsthand point of view of some of the processes that we were kind of lacking or had gaps in to properly intake what was becoming a more complex customer base, launching them on multiple products, on multiple channels, and then just ultimately like taking on larger and larger migrations. And so as we scaled the business and as we scaled the team, I was kind of able to kind of see some of these gaps. And that's where I'm really excited to talk about Scope Dogg today, which is helping us to fill in some of those process gaps without having to add more and more headcount to
Yeah.
address those needs.
Yeah. Well, I think I mean, it's kind of that natural evolution, isn't it, related to how, the business itself grows, which is as you described, like very often companies are starting with one product or a small handful of products, and then that product diversity grows, as well as
Mhm.
the services that are provided alongside that. And then suddenly you've got multiple products being sold across multiple segments in multiple geographies with
Mhm.
the need for a range of services at the beginning of the customer journey and then throughout. And you just get this inherent complexity or the more things to be, that you have to educate others on in the commercial
Mhm.
team, combined with the fact that you're monetizing it as well, right? So perhaps
Yeah.
something that was done for free, and therefore maybe there was scrutiny on, okay, well, how long does it take, and what is involved, and who do I need on my side? There's just a natural, much more scrutiny on that when you're paying for it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can imagine that's been quite a fun ride. A lot of services organizations now are much more central to the go-to-market motion, than they have been in the past, as evidenced by more than 50% of SDA members reporting up into the CRO and or the CEO, which is like your reporting path, right, in your
Mhm.
business. Um, so why has PS become more of a central cog to the GTM motion for you guys?
Yeah. And I think your point around just sort of evolving into a more complex kind of organization with more to offer and that complexity to ensure that the customer experience is maintained at the highest level throughout onboarding and beyond. Our customers always raved about our services organizations or our services teams. They just didn't know that what they were getting was sort of a services engagement. And so we had to sort of create some actual bounds around that and then sort of re-educate not only the sales and the go-to-market teams, but also our customers on what they were delivering. And so they do things kind of like um, uh, transforming or translate. What's the word I'm thinking of? Converting our deals into revenue generating customers, which is vastly important in our space because of the need to be sending in order to be spending. And so they have to be live. They have to have no downtime. Our customers have to have no time downtime between turning off their old program and turning on
Yep.
ours. And so the onboarding team has to evolve to maintain that customer experience and also do so just managing such higher levels of complexity.
Right. Okay. The thing is, and the point about structure is that you make is an interesting one. I was talking to someone this week, and their customer base is very much what you would, if you work in the software industry, what you would describe as SMB, right? It's small companies, with in some case a couple of staff, in some case maybe 20 staff, and I was talking with the person who runs services there, and we were saying, it's interesting, isn't it, where there's this kind of perception that, oh, in SMB they want everything, right? They want white glove service, and the vendors are sort of telling themselves, well, we shouldn't be doing this. We shouldn't be, it's too small of an ARR for us to justify that type of service. And it's like, no one told the customer that. They don't work in the SaaS industry. They don't work in the tech industry. They probably don't even know what SMB means, and they don't care. There's just their business, right? They're like, I
Yeah.
don't care if you think I'm a small company. I know I'm not a Fortune 500 company, but it's kind of where you just get this weird mix of just ordinary people going about, their lives trying to, sell clothes online, for example, and meeting with this, oh yeah, but actually you're getting this subscription service from us and it's so valuable and we need to charge you for it. And people are like, I don't care. But I just think that's quite funny. But I think you've really leaned into like the commercial mindset, right? As a services leader, you've built really good relationships with your colleagues in sales. That's evidenced by the types of conversations that you've shared with me that you're having at a strategic level about the go to market. Talk to us a little bit about kind of like how do you look to partner with sales, and what have been some of the key things that have helped that work well in your organization?
Yeah, I think when we first rolled out our new pricing and packaging, I first set out on sort of a tour of listening and speaking to all of the various sales teams and really starting to understand their unique motions. We've got new business sales and we've got expansion sales, and they're all working on figuring out their motions. And so making sure that with the leaders of each of those organizations or each of those teams, that I'm able to sort of pepper in at the like base level how their team should be thinking about attaching services at those key points in their sales cycles.
Hmm.
So we've sort of developed a couple different playbooks. Scope Dogg really addresses the new business and expansion motion really well. And I'm excited to talk about that because it allows for them to, at the time that they feel is right as part of their sales cycle,
Yep.
incorporate a conversation, and it's not dependent on me responding to them on Slack.
Yeah.
So kind of just getting, finding a couple key players on each team who are willing to try new things. That's also like a really critical component of success here is there's always going to be some people on the teams that are willing to try new things and to sort of take a more adventurous approach to their sales pitches. And so those are some really like cool kind of allies that I've created on that org as well. Another thing that Scope Dog does really well is sort of coaches them on how to pitch for things. So sometimes they come to me and say, Scope Dog is telling me that this will cost, $20,000. Can that possibly be correct? And I say, absolutely. And so they can also then say, I'm not sure how to position this to my customer. Can you give me some pointers on how to sell the value of this service to them? And then they can kind of use that on their own. So I think
Yeah.
that's like creating a tool for them that multiplies the impact that I was having over the first year. We created a Slack channel. Everything started as a Slack channel, which
Yep.
was come to the Slack channel and ask us your questions about how much something might cost, or is this even the right thing to be
Yep.
pitching to my customer? And so the person who was responsible for triaging all of the requests in
Yep.
that channel, she was about to go out on maternity leave. And so we kind of had a moment of panic, but after conversation with you this summer, I said, look, Jonathan did it. How hard can it be? We can create a
Really? I didn't
custom
know that.
GPT
Right.
to kind of support the absence of this person. And in doing so, we really developed a really powerful tool.
Oh, awesome. Okay, I didn't realize I was actually something behind it. Well, you should never listen to me, dear listeners and readers. But yeah, no, I think it's. I mean, I think what you have is that's really important when I talk about this commercial mindset is you have this pragmatism where your starting point is not, oh, my sales team doesn't know how to sell services. Oh, they're out there just coin operated idiots, blah blah blah, which I hear a lot. And I just don't, I think it's a flawed narrative, really,
It
right?
is. Yeah.
I worked in sales prior to Precursive for a company where we sold multiple products. And I think at one point in the area that I was working in, I was working across probably five products, selling into IT. So I had like a CIO product, an infrastructure product, an apps product, a security product. And I remember that I kind of gravitated towards two, maybe three products that I could sell well because I mean, at the time we were selling in Fortune 500 companies at C level. You couldn't, you just didn't have it rarely, and I was pretty good. Did you have people who could go across everything and know everything?
Yeah.
And that's the same in software, right? Like people gravitate towards they're good at selling certain products. So you throw services in the mix over the top, and you're like, oh well, why can't these folks, articulate the 45 onboarding flavors that we've got and the six tiers of
Right.
managed services that we sell? And you're like, you're smoking something if you think that that's the reality that people will be able to confidently articulate that stuff. And I think what
Yeah.
you've leaned into is like how does services take on a more sophisticated enablement motion internally
Hmm.
that allows smart people to get the right answers to questions. And actually, in doing so and getting it in a responsive way that you're going to go into, it builds their confidence about
Yeah,
services.
yeah.
And it gives them more autonomy to be quicker versus, like you say, you're in thread heaven inside a Slack with some poor person going, dealing with, 400 sellers or whatever it is. So no,
Exactly.
it's the mindset I think is so important. So Scope Dog, which is by the way the best name for an AI
It's the
product.
D O double G too. And
Yeah,
remember,
Dio,
you have
which you
got
told
to get
me,
that
you're like, yo,
right.
don't miss that G off. So given that as I think in my early university years, we were going deep into gin and juice, Snoop Dogg's Snoop Dogg. So I love it. But give us a little bit of the background to you've touched on it already. What were some of
Yeah,
the challenges that you were looking to solve for with this AI solution before we sort of bring up an example of the output?
yeah, yep. And I think to your point about like taking ownership of what we can, how we can frame what we are offering, and taking ownership of like, are we managing projects in the best way that we possibly can, is the way that we are focused on improving the onboarding experience for all of our customers. They now are coming to us in a more complicated light, which the reactive model, a reactive approach can no longer support.
Okay.
And so, with the stakes being higher, with the customers being more complex, we needed to introduce more project management rigor. And we are leveraging Scope Dogg now to do that. And the thing we're focused on right now is improving intake. So, because we know that a sales handoff to one implementation consultant is no longer going to produce success. And so we really needed to create new process. We didn't have more people to throw at it. And so this is a really fantastic tool that's allowing us to improve our intake part of our project management across the organization. And then also allow for our sellers to make a really clear and distinct decision later in their sales cycle of, does my customer need our standard offering? And they could even ask Scope Dogg if that's the case, or does my customer need a custom project plan?
Right.
And so that's kind of like at its simplest, the like way that we have framed our kind of in the beginning of our intake process of make a determination when you're building a quote in CPQ, right?
Yeah.
Of my customer is going to get the standard path or my customer is going to get the custom path. And so if they are going to go down that custom path, that's where they're going to start to use Scope Dogg. So it's sort of a series of AI assisted steps that
Mhm.
ultimately results in a clear migration plan that we, the services leadership team, can review and turn into a custom SOW. And we can turn those things around now in a day, which is really fantastic. So, um,
Nice. Okay.
uh,
Get it down
you
to
know,
30 minutes and you'll be keeping up with Team Precursive. That's our
oh,
average
wow.
SOW time now,
Yeah,
which is
I know.
quite good. So I'll touch on but it's a similar thing. It's a very similar mindset. It's about that. I think there's those moments, isn't there, in pre-sales where you want to be just like I like the fact that you've kind of got these two pathways to go down. You're either standards, right? Or you're more advanced. And I've always liked that. I think as a just in terms of like the elegance of offerings, you've got two
Mhm.
options. You're either, you know, that you fit this and some people will like that. And then some people are
Yeah,
like, well, actually, what would it engender for me to be in this more advanced piece? Or we are
right.
we are the unique snowflake. So I think that's interesting.
Yep.
I think for us also, the 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 sales team probably, I think, in many organizations is perhaps a bit more exposed to AI actually than other or departments and has been for a while because they've been using tools like Gong or whatever
Mhm.
it may be that have been recording their calls like this. I mean, we're using
Yeah.
we're using Gong. or they're using, Google or Zoom or whatever it is, and then leveraging some of that transcription work. So I think they're, you know, I found very open to, okay, yeah, send me, in your example, it's a custom GPT. Yeah, send it over and I'll
Mhm.
play around. And
Yeah.
the so in terms of what it does and how it's used, do you want to take us through that a little bit, and give a couple of examples, and then we're gonna you've kindly shared one output which I'll bring up and we can walk through.
Yeah, definitely. And kind of to your point about the sales team being open to it, our sales team recently completed an AI hackathon where the focus was on create a custom GPT. Scope Dogg had already been developed at that point, so I was out of the running on that one, but that's okay. We'll let the others have it. So we saw some really cool stuff coming out of the sales team on building their own sort of like deal review and RFP kind of support GPT. So that was
Love it.
pretty cool. Yeah,
Yeah,
great
awesome.
work by the team there. Yeah, so to kind of walk through one of the main use cases, although this is not the only thing that Scope Dogg can do, but I think this is a really unique and compelling use case to share today, which is this intake structure. So what we do is we have the teams pull as a first step, pull together all of the transcripts from Gong. And so we actually set up a Gong AI brief. It's called the
Yep.
implementation brief. And so they can look back on 90, 180, 365 days on an account and pull in all of the implementation specific content. And so
Yep.
that's kind of first step. And then I mentioned earlier that I've been sort of riding shotgun to a lot of the sales and implementation work as trying to figure out how to price and package that stuff. And during that time, I sort of was meticulously documenting all the information that we had to have in order to successfully kick off a project. And so we then trained a GPT on formatting the Gong transcripts and all of the any other subsequent attachments into this structured format that we then feed into Scope Dogg. And so that's kind of an
Yep.
intermediary step, but I think it's important because it allows for more continuity of the output of Scope Dogg if you're inputting data in a structured way that it's expecting.
Yep.
And that was always kind of my goal of like documenting everything into this like core scoping doc, which is again intended to just give the full picture to the services team so we can begin that sales and services alignment. So we take that and then we put that into Scope Dogg and we say craft a migration plan for this customer based on the scoping doc and the any other attachments that they want to include.
Got
And
it.
then it can spit. We've also trained Scope Dogg on what our SOW will look like. One other thing that our lovely Kelsey did before she went on maternity leave was she's a designer at heart. So she built out this beautiful library of building blocks for our SOWs. So you can sort of drag and drop those into the Word doc as you go. So we've
Right.
trained the GPT on that. We've trained him on all the services packages that we have. We gave him an extensive set of instructions of what each service is, what it costs, who's eligible, what the deliverables are within it. So if for any service package, he has a very clear set of like a framework to understand
Yep.
what it is.
Yep.
And so based on all that information we feed into it, then we can say, craft me a migration plan that I can pull into an SOW. And then we did also kind of put some controls in like, don't offer to create a final SOW for the salesperson because we do still need to validate and review and ask questions before it becomes a final thing we can send over to the customer. So we've put those controls in lately, and what we're getting out, like I said, is allowing me to have one 30-minute conversation with the sales team, and then pull together and put together an SOW based on
Yep.
that. It also might suggest questions for follow-up, gaps in the data that we're in the scoping data that we might have. So it really just like speeds that whole process along.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. Well, I mean, there's some similarities to a lot of things that we're doing. I'll just share a couple so you can catch your breath because I know what it's like talking for a before we go into an example. But I think one of the key things is how you have that to make this type of stuff work is it's the consistency of the discovery, the diagnosis work, the questioning, and the ordering of those types of things in sales, in pre-sales, in scoping. So, in our world, we have a very prescriptive approach, and the idea behind it was so that we could pre-AI was so that we just had very consistent ways of capturing information. And
Mhm.
that would be a combination of like in a Salesforce opportunity or in a
Mhm.
Google Doc. And then as we sort of advanced that approach from a pre-sale standpoint, we began to realize that, again, if we've got that consistency, then we can use whether it's Gemini or ChatGPT, we can use those similar to you guys, look at all of the transcripts, again, from Gong or our own AI tool actually now aggregates that a little bit cleaner because it just takes the summaries from the calls versus the full transcripts. And it's like,
Mhm.
this is the scope. So sort of like this is the scope of what the customer wants to do. And that then sort of in from there, the consultant, the solutions engineer can then use AI, another AI tool to say, based on what we know, build me the SOW and what bits are missing. So
Mhm.
what do I not know? Now, what's
Right.
interesting about that is that how you ask prospective clients for time has changed quite a lot because before it'd be a little bit like, oh, we're not quite sure.
Yep.
Let's get an hour in the diary, right? Now,
Yep.
keep asking for an hour here, an hour there, and your sales cycle starts going, extending by 4 weeks because you're asking for a lot of time. And so one actually of the byproducts in terms of like a sales cycle is that if you're using AI effectively, you start asking customers for less time.
Mhm.
And that should apply pre-sales and post-sales, in my opinion. And that's the key thing with AI is that you want to reduce the level of effort that the customer has to spend with you to buy your product and to implement or use your product on an ongoing basis.
Yep.
Because if you can do that, they get more time back. They make potentially better decisions about the implementation of your solution, or they can, spend time focusing on stakeholder management or change management on their side. So there's this
Yeah.
sort of it's very the sort of how you think about the time reduction is quite an important element of this. So if we I'll share my screen now and we'll
Yeah.
go through an example. So this is at the top here, we've got the prompt that was put in. We've anonymized this in terms of the customer name and in terms of like some other sensitive information. But so this was the prompt that was put in, and then take us through kind of what type of things we're seeing here in terms of the response.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is kind of that last step in the process I just shared that we've compiled the scoping doc using kind of other AI assisted processes. And then we've attached that. And then also the sales team having their own RFP process, um, attaching that document as well. So really just being able to capture all everything that has been done, because I think that's ultimately one of the big process gaps is like the sales team is not doing the scoping. It's just not translating into a project plan. And so
Right.
that's what we're trying to solve for here. So the output here is really cool because it does follow our SOW. And
Mhm.
so it kind of also gives like the sales team like sort of fodder, I guess, for talking about how they're going to be how the customer is going to be implemented. And so it just supports that enablement piece that you mentioned earlier, Jonathan, about like doing a lot of teaching that I myself or me and my other a few folks on my team couldn't do on our own. So the
Yeah.
phases here you'll see are aligned to our standard project plan,
Okay.
allowing for flexibility where there might need more time. So the objectives will come out, and then we'll use these components to copy and edit and replace into our SOW template. And so that's a human that does that part, that final step, because you need to validate everything against what we know using our both common sense and also like deep expertise on our own platform. But doing that then sets up the team with a project plan where we can, one, get final confirmation and alignment on certain deliverables that are totally like custom needs of this customer before the actual contract closes and before the kickoff happens. And so I think that's like a really, really important process improvement that we're making, where we can now look through this with a leader from our solutions architect, our implementation project management team, and our platform services team and say, what technical scoping or what technical discovery sessions do we need to make sure we're having in the discovery phase of the project based on everything we heard throughout the sales cycle? And that's a huge, huge level up for us.
Got it. Okay. Very interesting. Awesome. And so down here, for example, we've got, so just to play that back then. So in this example, the salesperson, we've received an RFP. We want to enable the seller to be able to understand what the migration plan might be, because that's part of the questioning in the RFP and part of the question that we need to answer. And it's prior to actually locking in that project plan, but it's like directionally, here's how we would migrate this customer. Here's how that's going to be structured. So they can go back, and if they're having that conversation with the client, they can actually speak to this plan without having a services person with them, right? In an educated way. So that's highly beneficial. And or they can bring you in. And then here what we've got is the direction of travel with regards to potentially the type of services that we would provide.
Right, exactly. And so if this is an RFP, but it's very late stage, so we're like at the point where we actually have to provide them with an SOW and a quote for our services. And so if you go down, you'll see it on section 7. So you've got the timeline, that's great. And then section 7 is great because it's a couple more like points of clarification that they can then take quickly back to the customer, get that clarification, and then we can finalize a quote for them using both Scope Dogg, and because Scope Dogg's also trained on our like scoping calculator, so it can know like, okay, for this number of journeys to migrate, it's going to take this many hours, which equates to said number of dollars.
Yeah, fabulous. Really interesting. So actually, you've got a mixture here of like quite sort of tactical, maybe what service should I provide and like pricing guidance through to kind of complex migration planning overviews. And then it will get to, just to be clear, it will give not the finalized SOW, but if we want, we can get a draft SOW based upon the needs of the customer. But would the seller then come to you with that draft and say, this is what I'd like to present, this is what Scope Dogg's given me, can you validate? Is that the sort of the process that happens?
Yep, absolutely. So the last step is to go back to that Slack channel, our original Slack channel, which has now evolved itself to have 2 buttons on it. One is, that's like 2 workflow buttons. One says like, take me to Scope Dogg, and the other says validate my Scope Dogg. So when you validate it, they connect the opportunity, a link to the opportunity, as well as a link to, because we have an enterprise license and workspace in OpenAI, they can share the link to the GPT response that they worked on and ask for validation in that channel. So we do kind of come back to that as our like point source of truth for like what needs to be done and what needs approval. And then they can either, we can say, yep, your pricing looks good, this all checks out, or yep, we can create you this custom SOW based on this, and these are the follow-up questions I So it just like gets us so much further down like that journey with
Mm.
and enables the team to feel like, more confident and learn from that. And also another important thing is that the team can't argue with Scope Dogg because it is a robot. So they have to take what it spits out.
I used that. I used that when I was in Denver. I used that line. Can't argue with a bot. What are the sellers saying then in terms of like how this is helpful to them day to day? Is it just I can be more autonomous, I'm more responsive, I've got a more professional answer. Like,
Yeah.
what is it? All of the above? What are people saying?
I think most people like to interact with GPT, even though they could look up that same information in a wiki. And I think it just
Yeah,
like creates a more fun way to engage with that
yeah,
information.
100%.
So another example is somebody saying, I initially I used Scope Dog to get an initial quote. I just want to confirm, we have a new information from the customer about what they're trying to do, and I want to confirm that what I quoted does still match that,
Yeah,
the requirements there. And
yeah,
so Scope Dog will go through and it'll say, short answer, yes. Let me explain this as to why. And so it
yeah,
reconfirms like what's included in the standard onboarding, and then also reconfirms like how we got to a certain number and that like why that number actually meets this customer still. And it
yeah,
also, another example that we use it for is to help the teams understand the difference between our technical support, like our L3 level
yeah.
of technical support, and our solutions architecture team, which has
Right.
been like an age old question for a lot of our go-to-market teams of like, who do I need and when do I need them? And I'm not sure the distinction between architecting a solution and supporting the product. And
Right.
so that's actually another thing we trained it on, and I'm proud to say that it sort of very often reiterates like why they would need a solutions architect versus things can be handled by technical support. So that's another like
Yeah.
cool example of just like that overall
Yeah, yeah,
enablement.
yeah. I just think like good sellers want to be autonomous. They don't want to
Yeah.
have to like, I gotta go, oh, let me get back to
To this
you,
person,
or
yep.
who have I got to go and ask, or I'm always going to Kate, or I'm always going to Jonathan, and that's a bottleneck. And some of them that do respect people's working hours, they're like, well, they'll be asleep now, and you know, whereas this, I
There are
just
some
think,
like that. Oh, that's so interesting.
yeah, yeah, there are some like that. There are some. I'm painting them in a good light. I was one of those. I was one of those
I'm
people.
sure. I'm sure.
But yeah, I think being autonomous, being responsive, being accurate,
Yep.
breeding confidence, because I just think that like if you're in the current environment as a services leader, 70% of your time needs to be focused on growth, like as in sales, growing accounts, retaining accounts, like it needs to be the majority of your time.
Yep.
And it's difficult to do that in a meaningful and structured way if you don't do something like this. Because, like you say, you are just fielding questions and intake coming from all places, and it's chaotic.
Yep.
Um, and I just think that doing this, I would imagine now you're in a position where you start thinking about, well, how can we use this at later points in the delivery cycle in supporting the delivery of products and services? Because that's really where we sort of started in one place, and now I would imagine you've got the cogs are turning about where you can apply these types of tools throughout that customer journey.
Yep.
I would have thought.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I'm excited to see how we can, we've got the implementation brief already, and now this process of putting into a structured data format is really important and going to improve the intake component,
Yeah,
phase of our project planning. Um, but how we can kind of surface insights around how we're tracking against, like how are we doing? It would be like the next
yeah,
stage,
yeah,
I suppose, of are we actually following this plan that we came up with, and
yeah,
where are risks generally occurring, and when are timelines generally slipping? I think would
yeah,
be
yeah.
like a really interesting like feedback loop into the whole process.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Very cool. Very cool. Well, listen, thank you ever so much for taking the time to prepare this.
Yeah.
It is massively appreciated. A very cool use case. Shout out to Scope Dog. So thank you, Kate. Really appreciate it. And enjoy the rest of your time in New York this week.
Thank you so much. I will.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks, everyone.
Sure.